All right, everybody, let's go ahead and go through some examples of angle classification. For your reference, I'm going to be using our textbook on page 208 and 209, specifically 208. It has all of those angle classifications and side classifications there for our triangles. And this is lesson 5.1 if you want to use that instead. So I'm also going to be looking at our worksheet. We're going to do page 1 together just because it says to use the actual measurements, and that can be a little bit difficult for those of you at home if you don't have rulers or compasses. So as a reward for following along with my lessons, I'm going to go ahead and go through page 1 with you. Oof. Sorry, I'm also playing with my 5-year-old. Okay, number one. Number one looks a little bit like this. Let me use my ruler, my handy dandy ruler here. So it looks a little bit like this triangle. Actually, it doesn't look anything like that one, does it?
No.
But these two sides right here and right here, I actually measured them. These are congruent. And if the sides are congruent, then that means their angles are congruent. So, but not all three sides are congruent, and you can tell that by looking at it, right? Compare that with number 2. Number 2 actually is going to be an equilateral and equiangular triangle. Spoiler alert. Okay, so number 1 is an isosceles triangle, right? Because 2 of the sides are the same. Isosceles. So that classifies it based on its sides. What about based on its angles? Are there any classifications based on having 2 congruent angles? Well, no, not yet, right? But looking at our angle classification in our book and the examples that we went over in the previous video, this is going to be an acute triangle. So this is isosceles and acute. If you really wanted to be precise about it, acute would come before isosceles. Okay, so that's number 1. That's great. Number 2, I'm going to go a little bit faster so that I don't waste your time with a lot of this video. Number 2 is, we already talked about it, it's equilateral. Equilateral, which means all the sides are the same, and it's equiangular. I apologize for my handwriting. Hopefully you can make out the chicken scratch, but it is equilateral and equiangular, and it's acute. So all 3 of those things, you don't really need equiangular. That's not one of our classifications based on the book, but I just wanted you to know that we know that if the sides are all the same, then we know that the angles are all the same. Okay, number 3. Number 3 looks a little different. Looks a little bit like this. This angle up here is really super duper huge, and none of them are actually the same. So based on its sides, it's going to be scalene because none of the sides are congruent. Based on its angles, since we have this one ridiculously huge angle, what kind of angle is that called again? Obtuse. So this is an obtuse scalene triangle. Number 4 again is going to be equiangular and equilateral and acute. So you can write that. So I'm going to skip down to number 5. Number 5 is also going to be obtuse and scalene. And number 6 is going to be as well. So oversight on my part, I was using a randomizer for these triangles. I really thought we'd have a right angle one in there. Let me show you what a right angle one would look like. For a right triangle to exist, it has to have that right angle square. Okay, so that is the first page, and that talks about classification. So we classified it based on its angles and its sides. For page 1, you really only had to do it by its sides, but I wanted to practice those classifications by angles too. So you could do or page 2, numbers 7 through 12, so long as you have, so long as it kind of looks like it could be the classification that you're using. I'm going to give it to you so that you don't really have to use a ruler and a protractor or a compass. So the next thing that we're looking at is page 3. On page 3, they actually give you the measurements. So looking at number 13, if I have a triangle, and it actually gives me the right angle square, so we know that's 90 degrees. Let me go ahead and make everything a size smaller. They say this is 4.8, this is 4.8, this is 6.8, and this is 45 degrees, this is 45 degrees. Okay, since two sides are the same, what kind of triangle classification is that? Hopefully you said isosceles. Isosceles has two congruent sides. I promise I write better on a dry erase board. Okay, that's isosceles. Classifying it by angles, see that right there? We have a right angle, so this is a right triangle. So it's a right triangle. And that is an official symbol for the word triangle. Because mathematicians don't like to write a lot, so they shorten everything, right? That's why we have variables. We don't want to write the whole word. Let's just represent it with a single letter or a symbol. Okay, so that is this assignment in a nutshell. And then for the last page, you can just draw your own based on the classifications that are there. Okay, see you soon.